Hi, David Wise here, composer of Donkey Kong Country and many, many others. And I'm just saying, like and subscribe to NerdCage Live.
So last time we were here, when we had you on, actually almost exactly a year ago.
Was it really?
Yeah, November of last year.
Wow,
about a year ago.
Okay.
So
Wow.
we talked about Killer Instinct 1, and so I want to continue our conversation and talk about Killer Instinct 2, which I believe is very underrated, and I feel like it's still to this day kind of didn't get the respect it deserved. I feel like it's kind of overshadowed a little bit. But let's talk about Killer Instinct 2.
Yeah.
So I feel like you guys moved pretty quick from Killer Instinct 1 to Killer Instinct 2. That was a pretty short window. So how did that?
Yeah.
So take us back to that development cycle to Killer Instinct 2.
Well, we finished Killer Instinct 1 and then decided, let's make Killer Instinct 2. So that's what we... No, well, to be honest, that period of time was the most exciting time for me. I mean, it was exciting getting the hardware and messing around with the Donkey Kong model and experimenting with 3D software. But then when we got the better equipment and the software got a little bit better, not too far along the line of getting the initial pieces of equipment, it was more or less the time that Nintendo said, can you make Donkey Kong? And they invested further in the company and provided us with all of the equipment, and we bought more SGI machines. That was also the time that we were seriously making KI1, because they kind of contracted us to make Donkey Kong Country and the fighting game. With Ken Lobb came over to help us with that and put it on a path that he wanted it to go on and introduce the combos, etc.
Yeah.
But at that time, the software was coming on in leaps and bounds. It was getting improved, and I don't know where it came from, but we just got this motion capture equipment. I don't know where the idea was getting us to beta tester it, or beta test it, as you would call it. We were asked to do that, and I thought, this is the only way we're going to get the animation done for this game. And so that whole testing the new software and the new hardware, and then this 3D motion capture stuff, and then watching movies like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2, it was a real golden age for cinema and video games, and everything was really changing. And so the first thing I'd do is go and make a Terminator-like man, which was Glacius, and then go and make a dinosaur because of Jurassic Park. And so that game, although I always compared Diddy Kong Racing and that game, DKR was the most fun I had, but I would say that Killer Instinct was the most exciting time because all these new things were happening at once. And when we got to the end of the game, I was kind of sad because all I'd ever wanted to do was make the fighting game. And when we'd finally got a team and we put it together and we had all of the tools to use, like the motion capture, the SGI, the big rendering engine called the Death Star with 10 processors, which rendered everything overnight really quickly. It was just magical. Everything was there. And when the game kind of came to an end, it's like, well, what do we do now? And it was just a no-brainer. We thought, well, this is it now. This is what we do. 3D graphics, 3D sprites, motion capture. Well, we got to do a second because, I mean, of course, there's Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2, and we got the Mortal Kombat 2 machine and a Street Fighter 2 cabinet and a Virtua Fighter cabinet, all at Rare. And so I kind of thought, this is it now. I am fighting game man. I'm not working on anything else. So I think we took a holiday because we worked really hard, and then towards the end of the year, around about September, October time, I think most people would take a week off, go somewhere, then come back and then start experimenting with new things. But I do remember going to a show with Simon Farmer, who was like one of our product managers and QA guys, one of my friends at Rare, and we'd usually go to America it was either E3 or CES. I can't remember which it was, but I'm sure it was either Game Fan or EGM, magazine, a guy that had done a good review on the game, and with some journalist, I can't remember his name, sorry, but he would communicate with us quite regularly about the game because he loved it. And then we met him at the show, and I can't remember whether he got the SNES version may have been there, or whether it was there was a few arcade cabinets there to kind of showcase maybe N64 technology or something. I don't know, but we bumped into him, and I remember he just came up and says, "Hi, Simon, Kevin, how you doing? So when's 2?" And that's all he said. And we had actually already begun working on it, and we kind of looked at each other as if to say, how does he know we're doing this? And he says, well, you're clearly going to be working on it, aren't you, after 1, if it's done as well as it's done. And he says, yeah, well, we'll let you know when we get back home. Maybe we'll send you some pictures and stuff. So we kept in touch with him, but it was an ongoing thing. We didn't sort of finish. We just finished KI, and then straight away, I think we took that little break, holidays, whatever, and just intended to carry on and sort of hit the ground running with what we'd already got, remodel some of the characters, improve them because the software had got better. And then there were some improvements like the particle hair and stuff like that I added to the characters rather than having these plastic sort of shapes made of geometry that were over the head. And it just enabled me to experiment a bit more. I think all of the whoosh lines and special effects were actually long strings of particles. So if you can imagine like a cane with a load of streamers coming off it, that's what I would do. Every time Jago would swipe his sword, I would tell it to emit these particles, and the particles look like hair. But because it's computer graphics, you could make these particles that look like strands of hair glow, and they would stretch a little bit when the sword would move, and so they would leave a trail of this glowing hair behind in the same shape of the sword, because they would be emitted kind of like this pen. They would be emitted all the way from this one section, and then create a really cool bright glowing effect. And so I was just playing with that with everything.
Nice.
And it was just good fun, revamping the characters, making them look a little bit more colorful. And also, I think now a lot of people prefer the look of the first game, and I get it, and the sounds of the first game, and the atmosphere that the first game had. But I wanted to make the second game a little bit brighter and a little bit more colorful, and maybe fall into more of a teen cartoon kind of style, because the first game was very sort of gritty.
Yeah.
And I think that added a lot to the atmosphere, and I think we lost that when we got to the second game, because, as I say, I was playing with all of these particles and effects and making everything more colorful and brighter. And of course, Chris Seaver did the wonderful backgrounds on there, and we had a jungle scene and the pirate ship. Everything was a lot richer and a lot more vibrant. The characters got revamped. Spinal had more color and more of a uniform rather than just a basic skeletal character with a sword. But the other thing I tried to do was give the characters a little bit more personality, and to do that with such a small resolution, you would only have so much control of what the renderer could pick up with regards detail on a character's face. So you had to really make the faces a little bit bigger and the heads a little bit bigger, so that the rendering would pick up more detail, like the eyes blinking and stuff like that, or a mouth, if mouth opened, just so that you actually got a couple of pixels to show that there was some teeth there. I made the heads bigger, and I think the overall look of the game, although it was prettier and had more character, I think it missed the mark for a lot of people, because I think they were expecting probably something darker and grungier than the original, which was a little bit grittier, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of people thought, well, no, it's gone too kiddie now. Not that it was in any way any less violent, and it still had plenty of finishing moves and everything like that, and the graphics were far better than the first one, but I think the overall aesthetic of it didn't go down so well. For one example of the first game and second game comparison to illustrate how I think we missed the mark was, I think there was a lot more time spent on creating the characters in the first game and just saying, well, I'll just go ahead and build this character because I want a Predator style kind of knight character, which was Fulgore. Because you got a bit better definition and more colors, and I was better with the software, you kind of overcooked things a bit. And so when I made Fulgore Mark II, I wanted to make him a lot more, I guess, like the Terminator series. You had big clunky Arnold, and then you had the T-1000, and he was slimmer and faster and more agile. And I wanted to make Fulgore more like Vega from Street Fighter 2.
Oh yeah,
because
the claws,
like a ninja. Yeah, so I made him slimmer waist and a more agile kind of physique. But when I look at it, I don't like him as much as they did the first one, and I don't know whether that's because I overthought the design. It could have been better, and I would love to revisit it and do Fulgore Mark III, and make something that was kind of a cross between the two, because I just wanted to add more detail to the original character, really. So I spent a bit more time on creating whatever I could in the short space of time, panel work and maybe a couple of extra pipes and a bit more reflection on him. But the first one just had more of a better stance, and he looked a far stronger character than the second one, even though the second one was actually a way better character to control, really, because of the moveset it had.
Yeah, I would agree to that.
But
I have to ask, because this has bothered me for years, so I finally get the opportunity to get it off my chest. The one thing, I love Killer Instinct 2, I do, and Killer Instinct Gold, I do, but the thing that bothers me the most, and I was wondering if you were going to get to it or not, but going back to the first game, I loved Cinder, Riptor, and Chief Thunder. Why were they not in the second game? Was there a reason they weren't in the second game?
I think we'd have loved to have put them in as additional characters or hidden characters. I think the whole idea was, they're all going in. I think we just ran out of time. We needed to get it. So had we had the time, then definitely. They weren't removed because they weren't characters that we thought were good. And of course, I'd have reinvented those as well. So it's probably just as well, because maybe I'd have spoiled Riptor for everybody and Cinder for everyone, because I know that the game's had its reboot and it looks beautiful and it's very fast and very frantic, but people like what they see first time around, whether it's a Donkey Kong model or whether it's a Killer Instinct model or whether it's a Mario model. And the people, when they see something change, sometimes there's an instant reaction, a gut reaction, say, hey, this is different. I don't like this anymore, even though it's better, maybe. And maybe if they saw that as the first rendition of a character, they would have accepted it as the first and says, no, it's perfect. But I think when you change things too much, which is possibly what I would have done with Riptor, I'd have probably given him a horn, and maybe a hood, which comes up more so he can become like a Triceratops when he rammed people, which may have looked cool, but it's the way you implement it. And if you go too far and you start taking characters too far, you can kill the character. And I think if you're going to do that, you may as well just invent a brand new character. So rather than having Fulgore in there, it would have been great to have had the rather than changing him, it would have been great to have a Fulgore and a Fulgore T-1000, you know what I mean? So there were two versions in there, and you could pitch them against each other. And maybe the same with Riptor. Maybe they've been experimenting on a different prehistoric creature, and we'd got 2 to battle with. You know, Cinder was a funny one because it was really originally Cinder was not flaming on my first renders of Cinder, and when he first went in the game, it was actually sort of black volcanic rock with glowing cracks. That's how he looked, with red eyes. And every now and then, we were going to make him sort of flame on, if you like. I remember at one point he was kind of black with the red glowing magma, and he was also called Magma at one point, and he was also called Meltdown. We put the fire around him, and it didn't really look right. It looked more like the effect when you got torched in Street Fighter 2, where you were kind of a charred black silhouette and you were surrounded by flame. And it didn't really work because he just looked like somebody that was already, his flames had gone out, and he was extinguished, and he was just sort of smoldering. So we said, well, let's just see how he looks when he's actually made of a volcanic flame, if you like lava. And so I managed to find a way of doing that in Alias Wavefront Power Animator Maya, whatever it was called at the time, and it just looked better. He had more presence as a fully flamed on character. But then, of course, he was basically just a clone of the Human Torch from Marvel, and so I don't know whether we decided maybe we won't do that again with this character, because I don't know what else we can do to it other than maybe introduce the charred version of him, which would have looked like a downgraded version of Cinder. So there's so much we could have done with the characters for the second game, but I think around about that time, people were starting to move on to N64 development and looking at the dev kits, and it was quite clear that we were going to be making 3D characters rather than rendered sprites. And so there wasn't, after a point in time, I remember I actually had a car accident, and I spent quite a bit of time off work with a broken knee.
Yikes.
And when I came back, everybody had moved on to the N64, and I had no clue how to work on the machine. And I started building some models for the next fighting game, which I assumed I was going to be working on. And I posted them online at some point. They were kind of like teenage, almost like Ranma 1/2 style game, and kind of a almost anime style fighting game characters, which I'd built in 3D. And I had intended them to be the next Killer Instinct game, but we were going to call it something different, and maybe it was going to be Killer Instinct like a prequel. And so the characters were going to be younger before they trained up to become whoever they were eventually. But again, I'd moved it more towards that stylistic cartoon style, so it probably wouldn't have been well received anyway. And Chris Tilston was the main Killer Instinct guy. He was the main guy that wanted to make fighting games when he started at the company. And he'd already moved on to Conker and started helping with N64 development. Excuse me. So I got back, and I had nowhere to put these graphics that I'd built, or nobody to create anything. And I'd got these 2 characters which I'd built. And then Tim Stamper says, well, so what are you doing now? And it just happened that Chris Stamper was making what was called Adventure Racers. And so he says, well, go and work on Chris's racing game then. So that's what I ended up doing. And I'm glad I did do it. And I seem to remember something going on with a Super Nintendo conversion of what we'd done with Killer Instinct 2. I do remember it was happening. I can't remember what it looked like now or how complete it was, but I know Chris Tilston was doing something on that at some point. But yeah, the game, I think it was a good sequel.
Yeah.
I do. I think it was everything it should have been for a sequel, because I think also the whole energy bar system was revised a bit, and the way that combos and the power kind of accumulated as you battled on. It was different to the first game, and that was sort of evolved a little bit. But and the moves evolved for the characters that we did keep, and also we introduced new characters. It's just a shame we didn't get chance to add in the original characters, and maybe then take that to a new level with Killer Instinct 3, which I also wanted to be a almost like a sideways scrolling thing rather than the VS. Yeah, I wanted it to move along, meet somebody, beat them up, win, lose, go back, beat them. You know, I wanted it to be kind of a progressive VS game. So,
actually, I got one more Killer Instinct question, and you tapped on it a little bit. We obviously got Killer Instinct Gold on N64, which was basically Killer Instinct 2. Some minor differences, but it was basically Killer Instinct 2 over on N64. Was there a reason that the first one didn't make it to the N64? I know we got it on Super Nintendo, which, by the way, you guys did a great job condensing it down to 16-bit. It still blows my mind you guys were able to pull that off. But how come we never got...
The conversion was fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, it was. How come you guys get the N64?
And I'm pretty sure, as I say, I think there was a version for Super Nintendo which wasn't released. And if the first one's anything to go by, from what I remember, it would have looked closer still to the arcade game. But I think at that point, I mean, we got Gold out, which was the kind of we originally, it was supposed to be Killer Instinct 1 on the N64, but that came out on the Super Nintendo because we could, so we put it out on that and says, well, no, we'll reward everybody with Killer Instinct 2, which will be, I think we wanted everything on there. We wanted to put both games on there at some point, but like a dual game. But as I say, around about that point, I had quite a nasty car accident, so I didn't spend a lot of time at work in the meeting room discussing what we were going to do with this game or that game. And so when I returned, Killer Instinct 2 was being converted to the Super Nintendo, and then it kind of stopped, and everybody, it was all hands on deck with N64 platformers, because I think after seeing Mario, we decided this is the way to go. We need to be exploring these 3D environments because this is the future. And I think that's what Tim and Chris wanted to do. Excellent. And that's what we did. We basically, every game then was trying to make the most of a 3D environment, like Blast Corp, DKR with the adventure element there, and with obviously DK64 too. You just had to make use of that 3D technology rather than doing just something that was going to be essentially a two-dimensional game on a 3D system.